Okay, we're going to get started here. Hello, everyone. My name is Brooks. I'm a volunteer with the organization. Thanks a lot for coming out tonight. It's just a small group, so not a lot of announcements, but we are here at the Paris Theater every Thursday. We have content. You can find it on our Facebook group or on our meetup group. And with that, we'll go straight to Karen here for her presentation. We want to hold all the questions until the end of your presentation. Okay, great. Well, here you go. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, like this. Okay. Better? Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. What would you do if I told you that the granddaddy of all psychoactive drugs can eliminate addiction as we know it? We're here to talk about that. First of all, I've got my standard disclaimer. And the long and short of it is, kids, don't do this at home. This is really some serious shit. Slide. 1 in 400 people die doing this. It's usually as safe as a cup of coffee. However, you have to have good medical screening, including EKG, blood work. You need a clinical setting. It's illegal in the States, Schedule 1, which is ridiculous because it should be available for everybody. But for now, go to Canada, go to Mexico. There's a list of the risks. I'm not even going to go through it. Slide. Thanks to 12-step groups, we have people coming out to talk about drug and alcohol. And we've dispelled the myth that it is about Skid Row people. We have high-functioning addicts. But bulimia is quite frankly disgusting. It involves vomiting. It involves gluttony. It's something that people don't want to talk about. And I'm here to talk about it. Yeah. I guarantee that every person in this room knows someone that's affected by bulimia, and chances are you don't know about it because it's not talked about. So we need to get this out of the closet and into the world, drag it out into the sunlight where it can't fester and grow more mold. I've spoken openly about this in a lot of recovery settings where most people were struggling with drugs and alcohol. And afterward, almost every time someone comes up to me and says, Karen, this is a problem for me also. If I had $1 for every person, I could fill up my gas tank, and we know that gas prices are going up. Slide. So I'm going to talk to you about the basics here. That's a question for Brooks. I'm going to talk about my history of bulimia. This was 35 years binging and purging every day, about 90% of what I ate. And I still had a family. I still had 3 husbands that are long gone. I have grandchildren now. People didn't really know until I started talking about it openly. And then even when I started doing that, I presented it in a way that I was better than I really was. Every day I would wake up and say, I got to do different. This is not right. Every day I would fail. And this is what millions of women, mostly women, there's about maybe 5% include men, but we need to bring this out. So I've had 2 floods, and I'm going to talk about that at the end, but first I'm going to go through the basics of what is iboga and what is Ibogaine, because there's a big difference. And it's in the dosing, and you need to know what you're dealing with here if you're even going to ever think about doing this. So this comes from the rainforest of Africa. It's a shrub that's about this big. When it reaches maturity at about 8 or 10 years, they dig it up, and they take the root, and they put it into, they shred it, and spoonfuls are digested, and it tastes awful. It's god-awful. Then about 100 years ago, someone figured out how to do an extraction that goes into capsules. And that's what Ibogaine is. There's Ibogaine hydrochloride and then total alkaloid. The purists believe that is the natives in Africa that use it for coming of age ceremony. The Pygmies first discovered it, but they were very generous and they shared it with neighboring tribes, and the Bwiti tribe uses it for coming of age ceremonies. So it's a big to-do. They have music, they have costumes, they have dancing, and at the peak of the experience, they throw a mirror in front of their face to tell them who they're going to be as adults. This is how you're going to live your life of honor and integrity and respect. So it's a pretty amazing thing. But in modern times, we have a man by the name of Howard Lotsoff, who some of you have probably heard about. And he was an advocate. He lobbied the pharmaceutical industries. He lobbied Congress to really no avail so far. He had devoted his life to this, and he discovered it, like many things, by accident. He was 19, he was in college, he was a heroin addict. He had a friend who was a chemist that gave him some powder out of his freezer, said, try this, and he did, and thought the next morning, well, that was weird and a wild ride. And then he noticed he didn't want to use heroin, and he didn't again for 4 years. So as he was gathering information and talking to people, he had 7 of his friends try this, and 6 of them stopped using drugs also. So this was the impotence for modern day, and we owe a lot to him. I heard about this. It's really effective for opioid addiction because 75% of the people don't have withdrawals, which is amazing. You're not going to find that in detox. You're not going to find that in rehab. And when I heard about it, I thought, okay, sign me up. I want to do this tonight. I don't care. I don't care. Well, you need a lot of preparation. You need medical screening. You need pre-care. You need to have firm intentions. And I did this twice. The first time, I was clean for the first time in my life for 6 weeks, which was amazing. And then life got in the way, as it does. And looking back now, I can see that I wasn't really serious about giving this up. As bad as I'm making this sound, it's worse, but it was what I knew. It was what I knew and what I had been doing for 32 years in my life at that point. So last November, I did a second flood, and again, I'll talk about that in a moment. Slide. This is not a magic pill or a cure. It's an interrupter. It resets the brain back to a point in time where you don't have these maladaptive behaviors in place. And I can tell you that right now the idea of binging and purging is as strange and foreign to me as it is to you, unless one of you is a closet bulimic, because I can't tell by looking. So there's different ways of taking this. There's microdosing, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and that is taking a small amount, usually root bark, every 3 or 4 days for a period of weeks, depending on what you're using it for. It gives you improved mental focus. It helps you identify negative thoughts and actions, and you can stop yourself. You're in a more detached state. But it is hard on the body, so it's something that you just can't do indefinitely. Then there's the flood dose, which I did. What happens here is it hits your system. You take these pills, and the brain stem distributes the medicine. It cuts right up through the cerebral cortex, and it disables your motor function and your depth perception. And you need help going to the bathroom because you can't walk. You can't find your bed again. It's pretty intense. You're sensitive to light. A lot of people get nauseous. I didn't, but it's pretty common for people to get nauseous, even on the extract, the Ibogaine extract. With the root bark, you're taking so much of it that it's sort of like ayahuasca. It's indigestible. It's gonna come back out. And then slide. So the first phase is the waking dream state when you take this. So you've set your firm intentions. You're in a room. The lights are out. You have an eye mask on, and you wait. And dosing is different for everybody. In my 2 doses, one time, my provider kept dosing me, and the second time I only took about 2/3 of it. It's just very subjective on the quality, on all kinds of other factors. You're ataxic, and the third eye pops wide open. My third eye has been open for 3 years, and I don't know what I'd do without it. So after the visions go away, you are still in a highly suggestible state. This is a good time for binaural beats. I forgot to mention, during the flood dose, you listen to Bwiti music. It has polyrhythms and binaural beats into it. It helps the medicine absorb in your brain and be more effective. So the second phase is, again, a period of reflection. It's not quite integration. You're thinking about the visions you've seen. Maybe they were memories from childhood. I have a friend who was a drug addict for 20 years. He had no idea why. He came from a good family, no obvious dysfunction. And under his flood dose, his first flood dose, he saw that he was molested when he was 3. And boom, it all made sense. Now, for me, I didn't have any repressed memories, but I did have things that were being presented to me that showed me what my life was like. So, again, this is the second stage. The third stage is where integration starts, and people say it lasts 24 to 72 hours, but what's really happening is your liver is converting the Ibogaine into nor-Ibogaine. It stays in your system for up to 6 months, but very obviously for 3. And you start to get, the light sensitivity starts to go away. You might have a little bit of an appetite. You might sleep a little bit, but you'll notice that for a while you don't need those things, and you're in a euphoric state of mind. You feel your unicorns and rainbows. It's all love and light. And you're also emotionally fragile that you won't know unless you are around something or someone that is toxic. So the general rule my provider told me, no douchebags. No douchebags for 30 days. And it's a good way to live your life, as it turns out. So this is not a pleasure ride, although I didn't find it unpleasant at all. It's not recreational medicine. It's for everybody, it's a psycho-spiritual journey. There may be extra complications if someone is coming off of alcohol or meth or opioids, but every single one of us, we go through a profoundly spiritual, deep journey. It's incredible. Then the other way of taking this is boosters and tune-ups. After the nor-Ibogaine has left your system in 6 months, people are back to life again. And, life goes on. We still have our families. We still have our jobs. We still have the dog that's pooping in the kitchen, whatever. And people find the need sometimes for either microdosing or a booster or a tune-up. And the only difference is the dosage. So a booster is a small amount. A tune-up is about 1/3 of a flood dose. And you would just approach it like you do a flood dose. You have the dark room, you have the Bwiti music, you have the binaural beats at a later time. You can supplement it, enhance it with cannabis to get the visions going. And you're basically getting, not a full flood, but you're remembering your first flood, and it kind of picks up where you left off and continues on your journey and your lesson, whatever you need to know. It's pretty amazing stuff. So these are the basics. Not too many people talk about aftercare. This is just as important as the medicine. You can't just jump back into your own life. You can't go back to work. You need to take, I say, minimum 30 days off. And then if you're self-employed, maybe, as I am, ease back into it gradually. But it's a good time to start new routines, because all of a sudden, speaking for myself, I had all this free time. And yet I couldn't just function as a normal person because my brain was still a little bit scrambled. I'm absorbing all this new information. I'm finding new ways of relating to things and people and concepts, ideas. And if you don't have proper aftercare, then you shouldn't even bother with this. There are a few aftercare facilities here in the United States. I couldn't afford that. I just did my own. But I knew what to do. It's a good time for nature walks. Start meditation. Go to the gym. Get a massage and get some of that energy moved around, because believe me, that energy is shifted and you kind of don't recognize yourself. Every time, I feel like I'm reborn. It's like I have the brain of a 12-year-old, a virgin brain that doesn't know what it's like to want to binge and purge, that doesn't know what it's like to drink alcohol until I pass out. Because that was another little side addiction I picked up along the way about 4 years ago. I'd always probably flirted with alcoholism a little bit, but stopped myself, and then all of a sudden I was a closet drinker. And now the idea of tequila, which I used to love, Risa, International Liver Damage Day in Mexico. True story. And now I don't like to be around it. Being in a bar is not a problem for me. There's just better ways for me of having fun, and I've noticed that alcohol, for me anyway, brings in a lot of dark energy because I don't stop at one. So that is a co-addiction. The main problem for me was, as I said, the bulimia. And co-addictions are interesting because as a sober bulimic, I'm like, hey, how can I hurt myself now? And so now I crave drinking, not hard alcohol, but just my particular poison, Mike's Hard Lemonade. And I've had a few slips with that. It's not the end of the world, but it's not something I should be doing, and it doesn't feel good. Okay, so like I said, I had 2 floods, and I'm going to talk about them. They were a little different, and they were the same. As I said earlier, the dosage was different. The first one, my provider had to, every 20 minutes, give me 2 more pills because the visions weren't coming. And the second time, I did just about maybe 2/3 of a regular dose. The first time was very clear images. The first thing I noticed was spirit animals, and they were big cats and pythons, and I didn't know what this meant, but I was told by my provider that if a serpent shows up, that's a really good omen. It will lead you on a successful journey. And then I noticed a couple of other little visions, and then boom, here we are, we're gonna rock and roll. So my eyes are closed, and I'm seeing these images against my brain, and I saw culverts, probably 8 to 10 feet tall, culverts of vomit coming out at a flood level, like think white water. Yeah. And then the next image after that was, again, vomit and mud imploding, the sinkholes that we see into the earth. And then I started seeing car crashes. And I've never been in a car crash. This was the medicine telling me, you're fucking up your life. This is what you are doing to yourself. And this is what it looks like. You don't see it every day. You're in a situation where it's really unique, but your brain and your spirit and your body are all talking to each other, and you're in a detached state, and you're observing all of it. And it's just really cool. Slide. Oh, could you back up? I forgot to talk. Thank you. See the little graphic I put together? Throughout both floods, I had this little image that it always stayed in the upper left-hand corner, and it was my brain buzzing on all this stuff. Now, my brain was literally buzzing. I heard this buzzing sound for 2 days, and I could actually see the medicine working. It's a dirty molecule. It goes through every area of the brain to scrub it out and clean it and reset it. So I was expecting to see dead ancestors. I called out to them, and they just didn't come. But I think that's because I'm kind of scientific, and I'm very interested in the brain and how it works. And so my brain and my spirit presented it to me that way, and that's what I saw. Then, after the car crashes and the culverts of vomit, I started noticing that when I would say a word, it would show up in red letters against the black background. Or if I said the word cat, it would show me cat, or it would spell out cat in the red letters. So I started to get a series of life lessons, just common sense things that we all know, but I wasn't very good about doing. Things like do what you hate first, pay your bills on time, don't procrastinate. These are things we all know to do. But as an addict, I was just getting by. I was just getting by. It's like, I'll pay the bills later, I'll take care of this, I need a McDonald's. So it's like, after the little life lessons, it told me that I needed to make a big decision. And I won't get into that, but I'd created a really chaotic situation for myself for about 3 years. And I was torn between choices. So it said decision in great big letters like you're seeing, and then it showed me 2 pictures of my 2 options. And I realized I don't have a decision to make. I know exactly what I need to do. I did it, and I haven't looked back. Here I'm just going to talk a little bit about the 2 floods. The first one was the strongest and the most powerful, but I wasn't really ready to give up the addiction. So when I did it again a few years later, last November, it was presented to me in a Disney-esque format. I loathe all things Disney. I don't know why I needed to see it this way. I still had the life lessons being presented to me in a scripty font that was too scripty for me to read. And I remember thinking I need my glasses, and then I remember thinking how ridiculous that was. So I don't know what lessons I was supposed to learn there, but it was Arabian princes and princesses parading everywhere, geometric patterns like you're on DMT or something, and everywhere. And when I closed my eyes, they were there. When I opened my eyes, they were on the ceiling and on the walls. This is kind of atypical. But I stopped the dosing at 2/3 with my provider, but I decided, I wonder if I had just kept dosing, if maybe the letters would have got better, or if I really needed to learn these lessons in damn Disney. But this pretty much wraps it up. I'm 6 months free of bulimia, and thank you. It is huge. And even more huge was when that day happened. It was on the 6th, and I didn't even notice it until today. Now, I don't want to be keeping track of time. I don't want to have a chip that means nothing if I have to start all over again and feel that shame. I felt shame for 35 years. I'm done with that. But there were other little benefits too. Like under the first flood, the very first thing I noticed was the PTSD I had, it evaporated. It was just gone. I've had migraine headaches since the beginning of menopause 15 years ago. And I'll get them maybe once or twice a year now. I was supremely addicted to diet soda and drank gallons every day for years. When I tried to drink again after my first flood, I spit it right back out. It was nasty. Now I eventually reintroduced that, but I don't drink gallons every day. I drink a little bit in the morning like someone would have their coffee. I've never smoked cigarettes, but people that do smoke and have a flood come out, they light up, they think it's nasty, but usually they'll choose to keep doing it because, God damn it, they gave up drugs, they gave up alcohol, they're not going to give up this, Mom. And about half the time they end up quitting anyway, after they do a booster or a tune-up. That wraps it up, and any questions? Helen. I've done them a couple of times. Yes. It was 10 hours of visions both times. Yeah, I was ataxic. Anybody is. You're just flat on your back. You need help to the bathroom. You can't judge distances. You're down for the count. This is not like mushrooms. It's not even like ayahuasca. They're from different continents. it's interesting because I'm very earthbound and very much nature girl. And most people lose track of time and they have no idea until a couple of days later where they are. But I knew what time it was, and I knew when the sun went down, even though I'm in a room with no windows. Tom? Intention is everything. It won't work without firm intention. And even then, it still may not work because you still have to follow up with solid work afterward. You have a 30-day window that's a gift from God or the plant that if you say and do the right things, if you walk the walk and talk the talk, you're likely to succeed. 75% of people that do this medicine with a good provider and with good aftercare, they're still clean years later. But the first time, I was looking more for a magic pill. And I was tired of living my life the way it was. And like I said, I did it for 6 weeks, which had never happened in 35 years. The second time, I started to panic, and I was found in the hallway thinking, I can't breathe and I'm dying. And I wasn't, and I knew I wasn't. And I've never been scared of psychedelic medicine, but I became afraid, and I made, out of fear, the firmest resolve, I do not want to do this shit again. I am done with this. I'm done with this. And so the second time I didn't do what I did the second time what I didn't do the first time, which was listen to some binaural beats for bulimia that I found on YouTube. And I'd played around with it a little bit, and I could see that it was working, that I was not wanting to binge as much. I was not craving as much. I was still doing it, but I probably cut it down by about 50%, which, again, is incredible. So after the peak experience on the second flood, the Disney flood, I listened to binaural beats for 2 or 3 hours, and I could feel my stomach rewiring itself. And you're very aware of your body, or at least I was doing this. Especially in the first flood, I would take 2 pills every 20 minutes from my provider because the visions weren't coming, and I would feel the minute the capsule dissolved in my stomach, and I would feel it hit the bloodstream and travel up to the brainstem. And the first time it was a little freaky, and I feel my heart slow down. The first time was a little freaky, and then I started thinking of it as downshifting in a stick shift, and it was just very comfortable. Intention is everything. It won't work without intention. Yeah. It's not the same as an opiate addict that's been to 20 detoxes, but I had been to the eating disorder program at Seventh-day Adventist Hospital in the late 80s, and they presented me a $30,000 bill after 5 days and said, "You're strong, you can do it on your own," because the insurance wouldn't cover it, right? I had done lots of therapy, traditional therapy. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on it. Talk therapy doesn't work for this type of a thing. A hard reset, a defrag, it works. You come out with the brain and body, well, not body totally, but of a 12-year-old, There is nothing else on earth that can do this. This should be available for everybody in the United States. But I'm not really sure if I think it should be full-on legal. I mean, of course, decriminalize all drugs. Hello. But the pharmaceutical industry, they're going to take out the psychoactive properties, and they're going to mark it up, and without the visions, it may not be as effective. You still have the reset of your head and your brain. I don't see it happening anytime soon. We don't even have definitive research right now. Everything's anecdotal. I'm a walking, talking anecdote. And I'm part of a small tribe. There might be 15,000 of us in modern times that have done this. I know nobody else. I'm a pioneer. Yeah, so thank you. This is why I'm talking about it. The word really needs to get out there. Exactly. The brain is in a neuroplastic state for 30, 60, 90 days. You are able to think with your cerebral cortex instead of your limbic emotional system. When you think about bulimia, just think of the electrolytes imbalance all the time. Think of, what's going on with the brain that makes you keep on wanting to do this for the payoff. Think about, the opioid receptors and the dopamine and the serotonin. It all gets reset to the way we were born, to the way that it's supposed to be. So it's just different. It's just different. And as I said before, as life goes on, we gravitate back toward being fucked up. It's what we do. But you're in a different place where you are more calm and detached and you can see it coming. So I don't need to get mad and scream at someone when speaking to them rationally will actually do the job a whole lot better. Go ahead. I'm saying that for people that have a good provider with good pre-care, which is diet, exercise, tapering down off of any drugs, etc., juicing a couple of days beforehand. You need to take the medicine on an empty stomach, and I knew how to do that, so I cheated both times. A last hurrah. But you need a good provider, and quite frankly, most of them are scammers. You have people on the streets in South Africa, and it's kind of like in Mexico where you have people buying a product, hawking it on the internet, just throwing it at people. You need a good provider that knows what they're doing because, as I said, it's dangerous, and you need good aftercare, whether you do it yourself like me or go to an aftercare provider that knows all about Ibogaine. And then you learn other modalities like going to flotation tanks and going to the gym every day. Hape I do Hape every day. It really keeps the dark stuff off of me. No, I hadn't repressed any memories. I was always blessed with clarity and a photographic memory. So I knew exactly why I was messed up. I was choosing to do the wrong thing. So, being blessed, they say admitting you have a problem is the hardest part. Not for me. There's no way I can justify that binging and purging 7-8 times a day is normal, healthy behavior. I just don't see how anybody could do that. Hape is a shamanic snuff. It comes from Peru and the Amazon, and it's spelled Hape with a little asterisk that I can talk to you about it afterward. But it really lifts off negative energy. It is tobacco, and I've never smoked, and I'm anti-tobacco, but it's a powerful healing energy. Yes. Yeah. I tried those. I didn't like them as much. It didn't blow back my brain. There were a couple of questions over here. Right. Right. Well, the reason for that is they didn't have proper medical screening. Maybe they ordered on the internet and thought they could do it at home. Maybe they had irregular heartbeat or irregular QT intervals. Or if they were a drug addict, if they shoot up the next day or even that week, the Ibogaine is such a detoxifier that you have to be careful even taking aspirin or Dramamine for a couple of days afterward. So they basically did it to themselves. It's as safe as a cup of coffee if you follow the protocol. Right.
classic dose, and they do that, and it's like, so it's like you clean it out, and it's like you can't take, it's like stick to Budweiser, don't drink a bottle of tequila.
That's part of it, but they weren't clean for that long. Because you have people going under this while they'll have them shoot up, and before the withdrawals happen, they will go under. A good provider knows how to do this. You can't do it with Suboxone or benzodiazepines, but on heroin, on the street heroin, you can, and it happens all the time. So it's partly what you're saying, they are not as used to it, but it is also, Ibogaine is a very powerful, extremely powerful medicine. So that's why I say, don't do this at home. That's a good question. I would go on Facebook, Ibogaine Universe. I've been a member. There's about 7,000 of us. I've been a member for about 3 years. I joined after my first flood, so I was accumulating information, and you can ask for referrals. The regular members are posting, and they have lots of testimonials, and that's the only way to do it. Yeah. Hi. Hi. A rationale to using. Most people, for addictions, yeah, a psycho-spiritual journey, people do it all the time. Yeah, maybe they had childhood trauma. Maybe they just need a reset, and they know they need a reset for some reason. They're stuck in harmful thoughts and behaviors. It's very worthwhile, and a small percentage of people do that. But like I said earlier, it is a psycho-spiritual journey for everybody, whether you're an addict or not. Hi. Not getting fat. But then I started drinking and I gained 15 pounds. That's huge. Body image is huge. Most bulimics, in my opinion, and most psychologists believe that it's a reenactment of childhood sexual abuse. So quite literally, it's I will control what goes in and out of my body. Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, the payoff is you have, much like a drug addict, you have, after following a purge, now the purging isn't pleasant, but the eating is pleasant, and so you got your, brain chemicals firing up here. It's like, ooh, that's good. Then you do the purge, it's like, okay, well, that's good. So there's this constant circular loop that's a payoff it's the most messed up way, but then again, I've never shot up heroin, but if I did, I would be pimping off my grandchildren by next week, because it would resonate with me. That kind of a payoff would resonate with me. That's interesting. That's a good one. I never thought of that. I was raised to not like Disneyland as plastic entertainment. It's more common now, but I'm from a family that we would go hiking. We would go backpacking up in the gorge for a week at a time. And so artificial fun, where you pay money for a fantasy, you drop a cigarette butt and someone's right behind you to sweep it up. I went there once as a child and just found it very unappealing. I did have some family trauma last summer that I won't get into, an issue with my sister, and my sister is very much about Disneyland, very much about appearances, so I suspect that had something to do with it. There was a lesson I needed to learn about accepting my sister as she is, and here it is. It's being presented in a way that you don't like. Too bad. And it was also interesting, too, because it was like a CD went into my brain, a CD movie, because it repeated twice. Everything, all the same things, repeated twice. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you hear it, and I was hearing things that I had, screamed at people. I was hearing some of my uglier behavior, and then I heard it again when it played again. I like it a little better. I want to hear about that. Okay. Helen. And that kind of goes with what I was saying too in my second flood, where all of a sudden I thought I couldn't breathe and my diaphragm seemed to me like it was about 2 inches wide. And it's like, I don't want to ever do this again. You know, it was harrowing, and yeah, but I would say doing it at home, he didn't have the proper information, he didn't have proper planning, he probably didn't have proper pre-care, and he probably jumped right back into his life and didn't have the proper aftercare. So there's a lot to be said for doing it right. Anybody else? The Ibogaine, you mean? Mm-hmm. That part of it is wonderful because, like I said, you come out of it full of love and light. Yeah, it's just you have to take 30 days off of your life, but that's hard to plan. Right. I was a notorious insomniac for about 15 years. I sleep a lot better now. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. I was awake for 36, 48 hours, and then I found myself, oh, look, I slept for 2 hours, yay. But as the Ibogaine continued to go through my system, again, part of the resetting is it's resetting to you like you were a child, and sleeping naturally as a child is what we're supposed to be able to do. No. A lot of high energy, a lot of thoughts, a lot of creative things going on. It's like LSD on crack, on meth, on, yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm not comparing.
Right. Absolutely. You're saying doing this with Ibogaine? I don't really see that happening. There's much better solutions for treating PTSD where you don't have to be down for 30 days. You have MDMA-assisted therapy. Yeah, that's part of the problem. I don't think they can grow the shrubs fast enough. They're already endangered because it's so popular, and they take 8 to 10 years to mature before you can harvest it, and I don't know how many floods that does, probably a lot, but it's like growing a forest in the middle of the rain forest. There will probably be synthetic imitations at some point, and I don't know how you can bring the spirit into it. I did. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to second that because I read about Ibogaine. Ibogaine. I've never heard no idea what.
It's really uncomfortable, and I think that's why we don't have more women here. You know, if a woman has an extra 10 pounds on her, she's like, I can't show up and talk about that. We can talk about drugs and alcohol, but the shame is unbelievable in bulimia. Unbelievable. Staggering. Sure. Thank you, everybody.
If this is your first time here, please follow us on Meetup or Facebook. We are going to be here just about every single Thursday, and we have other events that go on a weekend or a different day of the week. Yeah, May's got some holidays and other stuff. We might be, yeah. But you can follow us on Facebook or on our Meetup group for our future events. Yeah, please stay a part of this community.
Under what title?
Portland Psychedelic Society. Yeah. All right, thanks everyone.